Welcome everyone to tonight's special called meeting. The Clover School District Board of Trustees welcomes you to the special called meeting. The board meets formally twice a month, one work session, one board meeting. The work session format is as follows. Presentations posted on the agenda will be given. There will be an opportunity for questions on the topics discussed. The board will have the first opportunity for questions. Once the board has received all feedback requested, members of the audience will also have a chance to ask questions based on the topic listed on the agenda. Those joining us virtually via YouTube can send in questions to the topics through email. The emails can be sent to csd.communication@clover.k12.sc.us. There is no public forum during work sessions. Members of the audience wishing to speak in a public setting can do so at the regularly scheduled monthly board meeting on the fourth Monday of each month. Thank you. Without objection, the board will approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Without objection, the board will approve staff personnel as presented in executive session. Hearing none, personnel is approved. Dr. Quinn, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. As I'm introducing this next topic, I'm going to ask Ms. Marr to come forward, our Director of Community Engagement, and as she's coming forward, thank her because it's been a busy several months for her on the job, and tonight she'll be presenting our first draft and conversation about our 2026-27 calendar. And so we always take several points of feedback, and tonight, board, we certainly welcome your feedback. Ms. Marr?
Thank you, Dr. Quinn. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thanks for allowing me to stand in for Stephanie Knott, who is traveling this evening. It is my pleasure to present to you information regarding next year's calendar. As is our tradition, we bring several options to the board. We also receive feedback from a variety of different constituents and stakeholders, so we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. As I mentioned, we will have 3 drafts for you to consider, and that we will also be sharing with the public for feedback. We'll talk a little bit about the different venues for that feedback, and then we'll of course have time for questions and answers at the end. Of course, we have several standards that we have to stick to each year. There's several requirements that we really can't deviate from. And so, obviously we have 180 school days that are needed and required for our students. We have 190 work days that are required for staff, so we will of course work those in. And you recall that we try to keep the semesters as balanced as possible. We try to keep it as close to a 90-90 split as we possibly can. We, of course, there are makeup days that are required that we add to the calendar. There are 3 that must be listed on the calendar. There are a total of 4 professional development days that must be included. And then there are also at least 2 unencumbered teacher work days that are required before school begins each year. So these are the things that you'll notice in every calendar. There are a couple of special notes, particularly for this year. Since it is 2026, it's an even-numbered year, and we are required to have Election Day recorded as a holiday. You'll also notice on the calendars that there is a requirement that e-learning, the fact that we are an approved e-learning district, we must record that on the calendar, that is an option for making up days. And then there are other considerations, and these are things that you could perhaps hear about and perhaps have heard about over the years. Some of the questions and some of the suggestions we've received, and those include, would it be possible to get a full week at Thanksgiving? Is it possible to make that happen? And we do have a calendar that addresses that. Of course, there are folks who want us to try to have makeup days not be on teacher work days, and Ms. Knott, who put together these 3 calendars, has tried to do that when possible. And of course, there are folks who say, could we not get out a little earlier? We seem to have to start earlier. Could we not get out earlier? Perhaps even before Memorial Day or sooner. So we've tried to look at a couple of options that would do that. And then we, of course, have some, particularly our teachers, who wish we could start later in the week, rather than a start on a Monday, to have more of a soft launch. And unfortunately for next year, given the election day and some other factors, that's really not going to be possible for next year. And then I think many people are of the opinion that we shouldn't start before August, and so we try to at least get past August 1 before we begin the school year for students. So in your packet, and as we are sharing here, Calendar A, this is very similar to what we currently have. Some notes about the calendar: it's very consistent with the modified balanced calendar format that we have all come to love with these fall and winter intersessions. They've been very popular. I know many people who were vacationing last week who really appreciated that fall intersession. It gives us the August 3rd start date. It keeps that fall intersession. It keeps the traditional Thanksgiving with the 3 days. The winter break would be the traditional 2 weeks off. There is a winter intersession in February. For Good Friday on March 26th, that would be a professional development day rather than a school day for students, and we've had some conversation about that, what we're able to do on Good Friday. I am told that it's now a common practice for prom to be held on that date. I'm not sure if that decision has yet been made, but that seems to be the practice that has been happening the past couple of years. It provides for spring break, a full week of spring break, and the last day of school would be May 28th, which would get us out before Memorial Day. Draft B, it would skip the February intersession and give us the earliest possible end date. And that would mean that we were actually out of school by May 24th. It would keep the same August 3rd start date. It would keep fall intersession. It would keep Thanksgiving as the 3 days. It would keep a winter break, a full 2-week winter break, but there would be no February intersession. Professional Development Day would still be on Good Friday. You would keep a spring break, and the last day of school would be May 24th, which is a full week before Memorial Day. Memorial Day is a little bit later next year, or the fall's a little later in the month next year. And then finally, with Draft C, this addresses those folks who really want to try to get a full week of Thanksgiving. So this is the effort to do that. So it would shorten the fall intersession, but still give you a full week of Thanksgiving. The start date would be the same, of August 3rd. Teacher work day would be on October 7th, and there would be 2 student and staff holidays, October 8th and 9th. So you would still have a 3-day break in October, just not the full week. And those 2 days would really shift to the Thanksgiving week to get a full week there. The winter break would be the same, a 2-week break. You would still get a winter intersession in February. It would still give you a professional development day on Good Friday. You would still keep a spring break week, and the last day of school would be June 1, which is just a day or a couple of days later, right after Memorial Day. We, of course, want to receive as much feedback as we possibly can, and we welcome that. These 3 drafts will be presented to the Teacher Forum on October 15th. It will be shared with the Parent Advisory Group that next day on the 16th. It will be shared with district leadership later this month. And of course, we will gather all the feedback, including an online survey. We're going to share that and launch that tomorrow for our parents and staff to give feedback and share their thoughts on these 3 drafts. So we will compile all this information and share it with you so that you will be prepared to make a decision next month. What questions or comments do you have?
Ginger, with graduation, we typically try to do that on a Thursday. We've always tried to do that on a Thursday, pending scheduling. In Calendar C, with the dates going into the beginning of June, would that graduation date change with any of those calendar options?
No, graduation date for Calendar C
It's in June.
It would be in June, that's okay,
would be June 1.
June 1.
Calendar B
Is
is
that Monday?
on a Monday, too. Right.
So
Calendar B would have a graduation on a Monday, May 24th as well.
Correct.
Yep, that's right.
So Calendar A is the only one that has that same typical Thursday
Right.
graduation date?
That's correct.
I have a feeling our high school's going to weigh in on that.
Oh, I'm sure.
pretty consistently, they like Thursday. I can tell you that the 4 York County superintendents have been discussing offline, trying to make Winthrop work. And so now that Fort Mill has 3 schools and Rock Hill has 3 schools and York, and we have typically been safe on Thursday. No one wants that date. But everybody wants 3 days, 3 schools on either a Friday or Saturday. And so there's a lot of debate going there. So I feel like Thursday is going to always be safe. I don't know about any other day, but we'll have to check into that.
Any other questions?
No questions. I just, like all of us, have heard the inquiry about having the whole week of Thanksgiving off, so I'm glad y'all did present an option for that. I think that's interesting to see what people think about it. I think the dismissal end of year into June is probably going to be a deal breaker.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
I think shortening the October break, moving it to Thanksgiving, will get some people's attention, but that June end of year is probably a little tough to stomach.
And was it, just because I'm spitballing here, but moving the date to June on the
The first.
week, the 1st, that's if we did a full week at November. There's still those couple of days in October. Do we have to take an intercession in October at all, or are those dates potentially able to move around?
I think, obviously at this point, we could still move some things around. I just think that the response has been so positive about having an October break. It would be difficult to sell that.
And I can tell you, even when we've had graduation on the Thursday and we've had to come back on a Friday, sometimes that Friday has been into June, that has never been an issue. That Thursday graduation, and then sometimes then the Monday is Memorial Day, and then we have another day, and that's, I think, one of the calendars has that. So we've done that before, and that has not been a negative issue. But we've never presented this many options. This is the first time we've got 3 pretty different calendars. Our calendars, there's really not a lot of movement you can do, and they've always looked pretty close to one another. These are 3 very different calendars, so it is going to be interesting to see, to your point, Mr. Burris, what they like.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see what districts around us do as well, because I know some people like, especially some of our teachers like that when they're the same.
They like for us to go first, and then they figure out what they want to do after.
Then they blame it
We
on
probably
them.
won't know until after the fact.
Ms. Marr, with the draft B, with the no intercession in February, moving it up to the last day to May 24th, was there any discussion there about that no February intercession because of different holidays falling in January and February, and it was hard for the students to get back in that routine? Was that one of the reasons that maybe we looked at going away from that intercession and also getting out earlier in the school
Yeah,
year?
I think that the goal was just to get out as early as possible. That could perhaps have contributed to the conversation, but I think the main goal was to try to get out as quickly as possible.
Look, you might remember our elementary teachers used to call February the longest, shortest month
That's exactly right.
because of the time between January and spring break to get a break.
Well, we had a lot of holidays, and so, like I said, it took a while. You bring the students back in the first of the year, and then you had a holiday, and then you had another holiday. And it was hard to get them back in those routines.
I think to your point, the breaks, the way they are now, the October break is about 10 weeks into the year.
Right.
And that February break is only like 6 weeks after we come back from the holiday break, so
Correct.
pretty big difference there.
And speaking of the elementary teachers, which one of the calendars, I know we have a window in the spring with state testing. Which one of these, do we know yet next year?
State
When
testing
state
is
testing
not
will-
set, it's set on whatever your 175th
So
day
you have,
is.
we have
We have windows now,
Okay.
which is much better than it used to be.
because I know that a lot of the elementary folks especially concerned about kids missing time right before testing and affecting scores. Okay.
Anything else?
I do like I'm not sure about the October versus November days off in this calendar, calendar B. But I do like that because we are going to school so early in the year. I mean, an early date in May really can make your summer seem a lot longer. I mean, you were already off for Memorial Day, that, you know, at the end of the month, and having that long weekend where you don't have to worry about coming back, or, I mean, I think that would look attractive, you know, as a parent, I think. I'm just not, you know, I'm interested to see what people say about that, about the earlier release day in May.
Well, we will certainly let you know what that feedback
We need to
is.
ask for if anybody in the audience has. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for Ms. Marr? All right, thank you, Ms. Marr.
All right, our next speaker is Ms. Sauls, our Chief Human Resources and Strategic Planning Officer. She has begun the arduous work of what it takes to staff new schools, and she has presented to all of our staff what our process was going to be. I thought it would be germane for the board to know what our staff is hearing and how that process is working. So I'll ask you to walk the board through that at this time.
Well, thank you, Dr. Quinn, members of the board. I wanted to just talk with you about our staffing process for this exciting time where we're going to be opening 3 new schools and staffing those schools, and recognizing that this is a new charge for all of us, and how sometimes it can be a little unnerving for staff members. We wanted to ensure and reassure everyone that we are entering this process with the understanding, with the movement of, we are working transparently, and we are working in ways that are going to be as fair as we can possibly be to all of our staff and all of our schools. So we are moving forward with that as our guiding principle for our staff. Speaking of guiding principles, when we started on this work, we knew that we had to have some things in place that were going to guide our work and help us make sound decisions. So I'm going to share with you now some of those principles. And the first is that we are operating under the belief that we have all of the staff that we need to staff our new schools currently in our existing schools. So with that, we are prioritizing internal transfers for staffing our new school. And also, in addition to that, making sure that the staff at each respective grade band are placed before we start to transfer folks across grade bands. So that way we can ensure that everyone has a landing spot and no one is being displaced inadvertently. So that's just kind of our safeguard to make sure that everyone has a place who is coming back, who's going to be joining us the next year. The other guiding principle we really wanted to focus on was that we are very fortunate to have a cadre of working retirees in our district, and we honor that employee group. So we wanted them to know that they are too invited to express interest in transferring to one of our new schools. So and of course, they will be hired in accordance with the SCDE's regulation and policies regarding that process. Next, one of our guiding principles is that recognizing that we'll now have 2 high school campuses, and there might be some programming or classes that are that will be available at both. We wanted to ensure that any staff members who have to travel between both campuses because of their programming, we make sure that we schedule them in a way that is supportive to them, so that there's not a lot of transition. So that could look like semester or quarter planning for one campus over another, or if looking at their daily schedule, if there's an opportunity to ensure that their daily schedule supports their transitions, we want to make sure we do so. And then to make sure that everyone knows that opening up our new high school, that is going to be a 2-year process, the staffing process. So, you know, the first year we're going to open up 9 through 11, and then the following year we'll open up for the 12th grade class. So we want folks to know that we're going to be shifting some folks during this next year, 26, 27, but there will also be another smaller shift in 27, 28. So what I'm going to walk through for you are 2 kind of processes that will be running concurrently. I'm going to share with you what we are doing internally as an HR department and as a district office team, as well as what is kind of outward facing what our schools and our teachers will experience. So the first, when we think about what has to happen behind the scenes, we have to first assess our staff needs and gather some information. And that, based on the attendance lines that you approved last month, we have to now figure out what our student enrollments are going to be at each school. And then from there, look at how many students we will have at each grade level, particularly in our elementary and middle schools. The high school looks a little different because they're more driven by courses and not so much the student numbers at each grade level. But we want to make sure we have that information. And once we do, we're going to apply our staffing strategy or ratios for our elementary and middle schools to then predict how many teachers we need per grade level at each school. So our existing schools as well as our new schools. That's going to help us know, too, how many teachers need to shift from any of our existing schools to help staff our new schools. So once we have that information, we've actually started working on that already. We'll share that information so that folks know what schools, which ones, if any, will be transferring or need to lose staff because they'll be transferring and students transferring to one of the new schools. Our second phase of this process is going to be where we start looking at assignments. And so in order to do that, we wanted to initiate our transfer process, or our transfer portal, as we sometimes call it around here. And so we're giving teachers the opportunity to indicate their interest in transferring to one of our new schools. And we're doing that through an interest form that we have deployed September 24th, so not too long after the attendance lines were approved. We gave folks the opportunity to start expressing their interest in transferring to one of our new schools. And then from there, we'll gather that information and disseminate that information to our principals, all of them, both at our new schools and our existing schools, so the principals at the new schools can start meeting staff members. We're calling it interviews and observations because it's an opportunity for the principals to meet these staff members, but also for those staff members to meet the teachers and get to know, staff members to meet the principals, and get to know them, to learn more about their vision for their schools and how they might be able to contribute to the school population. And then we'll start to make some initial kind of preliminary decisions about where those staff who've indicated they're interested in transferring, where they might be able to fit. And that's not going to be the end of the process, but that's kind of our first phase of this process.
It might be important to say we won't make any announcements on who.
Correct.
Because there's a second phase, and she's getting ready to talk about that. But that phase will happen, and some decisions, preliminary decisions will be made, but not shared quite yet.
And so I want to just kind of draw our attention to our transfer policy, and you're familiar with this because we had some discussions about this over the last few months. But just to reiterate the fact that our transfer processes are guided, they're not arbitrary, they're guided by your board policy. So there are two types of transfers, the voluntary transfer and the involuntary transfer. The biggest differences between the two is who initiates it. So an involuntary transfer is initiated by the staff member, whereas voluntary would be initiated by the superintendent or her designee.
Or vice versa. I think you said that
Oh,
backwards.
did I? Sorry. Involuntary initiated by the superintendent, voluntary initiated by sorry, I sure did, by the employee. The request should come in writing, and so we've created a form to help facilitate that. And then, and so we've got that, and I'll talk a little bit more about the form, and then approval from both principals. So that's important because this is a process that's not going to happen in isolation. We're going to have a number of conversations with all principals, the existing school principals and our principals from new schools, to ensure that we are making decisions that are supportive of the staff members, but also supportive of the sending and the receiving schools. So we ensure that we're not depleting any one school of any type of teacher, and that all schools have the staff they need to ensure the instructional continuity that's necessary. For our involuntary transfers, you'll see, again, initiated by the superintendent. There will still have to be approval by both principals. So again, this is not an arbitrary action that's taking place. And then we want to make sure, we will ensure that it takes place in accordance with your board policy. So that was a little bit of what we do behind the scenes here at the district office. Here, I'm sharing with you what the teachers will experience and what they will see. So first, we launch our interest form, and we launched that back in September. Then, once that information is gathered, the principals will have an opportunity to get out and start meeting staff members and vice versa. And that's what the observations and interviews portion of this looks like. And then there'll be selection. No notification just yet, as Dr. Quinn mentioned, but there will be some preliminary suggestions and selections happening. Back to the district side, phase 3. Once we do that, we talked about there's going to be another step to this process, and that's going to be where we need to reassess and determine what our needs are. So once the preliminary lists and decisions have been made, although not communicated, once those have been made, then we need to go back and look at the lists of the sending schools and the receiving schools to ensure that they're balanced and that everyone has the staff in place, again, to ensure the instructional programming, the continuity of our instructional programs. So we will reassess those needs, determine what gaps need to be filled, and then from there, we will look at our initiating our reassignment process. Now, I want to just remind you of our reassignment process and those criteria that you approved last month regarding that policy. And so these are the 5 criteria we agreed that we would use in the event that we have to reassign teachers and staff to any of our schools, but namely our new schools. So these are not, again, going to be arbitrary decisions. These are decisions that are going to be informed by the teacher certification, their contracts, and the skills and talents that they offer to make sure that we have that balance in all of our schools. So what that looks like now for the staff members is we will be identifying those gaps in the schools. We'll make sure that we are applying your board policy to those decisions for selection. Again, we will be consulting with and conferring with principals to ensure that we have balance at all of our schools, and then we'll communicate those changes and implement those changes after this process. So it is kind of a 2-wave process, starting with the initial the voluntary transfers, and then moving into, after we reassess, what our a reassignment would look like. So timeline, that's really important, and quite frankly, we kind of wanted to be as aggressive as we could with our timeline, recognizing that this is a lot of change, and we wanted to help support folks through that change, have it happen, and then allow them to move on with the rest of the school year so they can focus on not where am I going to be next year, but to focus on teaching and learning in their classrooms. So again, we are assessing needs, our staff needs, and those have been going on for quite a while. We've already launched our voluntary transfer and intent form for our our certified staff. We launched that in September. This week, we're going to be launching it for our classified staff members, because they too will have an opportunity to, number one, tell us their intent for returning next year, but also to let us know their intentions or interest in transferring to one of our new schools. So that will be taking place through September through October, maybe even into early November. And then during that time, we'll have our principals, they'll have that opportunity to meet with staff, both certified and classified staff, to determine a good fit. And then we will initiate our reassignment process, November into December, maybe even into January, and then hopefully be able to have all of that wrapped up by January, hopefully no later than February. So again, we want to do it as soon as we can so that folks they're very comfortable and know where they are going to be the next year, and then they can just focus on the remainder of this school year. So some of our next steps that are already in place and things that we are doing to support staff, because again, we know this is new and this is different and sometimes can be a little unnerving. We want to ensure that we have those clear steps in place for guiding our transfers and our reassignment process, as well as we want to make sure that all the moves that we make are in accordance with your board policy. We have created, with the help of Stephanie and her department, we have created a transfer webpage that contains the PowerPoint. It has a copy of the policy, and it also has some FAQs that we've collected from teachers and staff across the district already. So those questions that folks are asking, we can have some standardized responses so that if they have the question, somebody else has it. So we want to make sure that that's communicated to everyone. And that, in a nutshell, is our staffing process for this exciting time. What questions do you have?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Sauls, with the criteria for reassignment, was that list in order of, or is that just a basic list?
That is just a basic
Okay.
list, so,
Because I'd like to think that total years of experience as well as total years in the district would play a role in some of these decisions. I know in some cases that won't be possible. But, and then speaking of the involuntary transfers, what if who solves the issue if the two principals don't get together on the same page? What if one principal really wants this person and the other principal really wants to keep that person? Who makes that call?
I do.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. That's what I thought.
It really should not come down to that, but if it does, we'll work through it very democratically, but we
Well, I
we
just
have
know
to
that
get somewhere.
some principals have teachers they love and they'll fight for them maybe to keep them, so.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
thank you.
Anything else? No, thank you.
Hold on, any questions from the audience?
Thank you. Good call.
No, thank you, Ms. Sauls.
All right, don't go anywhere because we are going to begin the next round of policy. And correct me if I'm wrong, is this the last round or we still have several more?
This, I think, is going to be our last round. We might have one or two
Stragglers
policies,
at
kind of
the end.
stragglers, but this is our last big push.
Okay, so board, we get model policies every year based on regulation or law changes. So this is the last big push. We may have a few others. I did pull one policy tonight that we were going to bring to you. We just need more time with it. And that's on AI, and we just got some work to do. But I'll ask Ms. Sauls to take us through these changes now. And
thank-
this is for discussion only tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Quinn. So many of our policies for discussion tonight center around student services. There's some that dabble in instruction, but mostly student services. The first being our school year, and this policy revision is brought up to be in alignment, with our Educator Assistance Act. So as you know, we have 190 working days for staff and 180 days of instruction for students. So those 10 days, this law has put in place some stipulations for how those 10 days are used. So no more than 2 of those 10 days will be for staff work days in preparation for the opening of school. So teachers will have 2 protected days right leading up to the beginning of the school year, for them to prepare for such. 4 days must be used for professional development in alignment with instruction standards and the like. And then the remaining 4 days are for teacher preparation and planning, teacher conferences and things like that.
Can I just say on a positive note that those 4 days now that are PD can count towards a teacher's recertification?
Yes.
Before they had to take additional classes outside of those 4 days. So that was a very positive change in the Educator Assistance Act.
Thank you. Our next policy is regarding charter schools, and this establishes a basic structure for establishing and operating charter schools within the district.
So we have to do that? What? I don't understand that policy for us.
In the event you wanted a district charter, there
Oh,
are some
if we wanted to
district,
create our own.
yes, there are some
okay,
district-run
gotcha.
charters, yes.
Gotcha.
Good question, though.
Thank you. For our policy regarding student absences and excuses, the language that we're proposing strengthens the importance of attendance and the daily attendance. And also there's some guidance for excusing student attendance, for excused days for attendance, as well as some guidance for makeup work for students who have those excused absences. For the next policy, again, this is our excused absences, but this is differentiated because this is for our students in our career and technical classes. Those who are a part of an organization, sometimes there's the need for them to participate in their organization's development or activities. So this model policy that we wish to adopt allows for those excused absences for students who are participating in a CTE organization outside of school or off of school grounds. It gives them the opportunity to participate in that and have an excused absence.
And board, you've always done that. These are DECA, HOSA, all those FFA.
Definitely.
You've always allowed
We just
excused.
always call it school business
We've,
days.
yeah, or, yeah, we've excused, we've called it an excused absence.
So our next set of policies are regarding sexual harassment and retaliation for students. Just a small language change in the first policy that it will replace the word cell phone with personal electronic devices. And then for the rule for that policy, as well as the forms, again, there was one language change where we changed from the word resolution to mediation, and that is also consistent with our sexual harassment policy for our staff members. And then it removes terms like gender identity, nonconformity, gender stereotypes. So it removes that language from the policy or the rule. Next, our cell phone rule or our personal device rule just provides some additional benefits to having a non-distracted school environment. And then for the model rule, we wish to adopt that model rule, and that rule provides us the authority to issue consequences for students who use their personal devices during the day. Our next policy is a life-saving medications policy. There's a slight language change where it replaces DHEC or South Carolina DHEC with the South Carolina Department of Public Health. That department has had a new name change, as well as it's adding some additional medications, life-saving medications to the list that are approved for use in the buildings, in the schools, namely the Adrenaclick. There's an auto-injector and Neffy, adding those life-saving medications to the list for students.
One day we'll see sugar added to that list.
Ms. Sauls, if we're adding these medications to our list, does that mean the school will be providing these in the nurse's office, or?
They won't be providing them. The students will
We'll
have
have them with them? Okay.
Yes, and then they'll take it under the nurse's care. should they need to. Again, the rule for that policy is going to outline the storage and the administration of said medications for students and ensuring that there's appropriate training for the use and dispensing of that medication. And those are our policies for discussion at this time.
Board, you have them in red line and strike-through format if you need to see them that way.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? Thank you, Ms. Sauls.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chair, that concludes the reports and for the work session.
All right, thank you. We need a motion to reconvene in executive session and leave the special called meeting.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Meeting